for years afterward. Some would call it heroic, others reckless, and a few would say it was pure destiny. But everyone agreed on one thing. Nobody expected a medic to be the one who changed the course of the battle. No one expected her. Not the men she served beside, not the officers who had assigned her to triage tents, and definitely not the enemy convoy that rolled confidently through the valley that morning, unaware that the Reaper waiting in the sky was a woman they believed wouldn't even pick up a rifle. Like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more stories. Her name was Captain Elena Ward, 32 years old, flight medic, calm, quiet, and always the last person to speak in a room. She had joined the Army to save lives, not to take them. That was her oath. That was her calling. And for most of her years overseas, that oath defined her. She patched wounds on dirt floors. She held pressure on arteries with her bare hands. She whispered to dying men that everything was going to be okay, even when it wasn't a tea. But war has a way of reshaping a person, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. The base sat deep inside Korak Valley, in the mountains that sliced the horizon into jagged silhouettes. It was early morning, the kind where the dust hung perfectly still and the light carried a cold blue tint. Elena had been in the medical tent, sorting bandages and checking morphine inventory. She remembered the quiet, the kind of quiet that felt wrong. Then the first explosion hit. The ground trembled. The canvas walls shuddered. A chorus of distant shouting broke into chaos. Elena didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She ran. She always ran toward the sound. Outside, smoke rose from the observation post on the ridge. A direct hit. Radio chatter snapped back and forth, clipped, frantic. The enemy wasn't probing the perimeter. They were pushing in, coordinated, fast, committed. And then the radio crackled with the message that would change everything. Apache crew down. Bird intact but pilot critical. Co-pilot KIA. Anyone near the pad respond. The words hit her like a punch. She knew that helicopter. She knew that crew. One of those pilots was her closest friend. She sprinted toward the flight line, boots pounding dust, heart beating like artillery fire. She didn't know what she was going to find, only that she had to get there. But what she found on that landing pad would drag her into a moment no one could have predicted, and no one would ever forget. The landing pad was a mess of smoke, dust, and frantic movement. Soldiers rushed in every direction, some firing toward the ridge, others dragging the wounded toward cover. The air cracked with the sound of distant rifle fire, echoing off the valley walls like thunder with no storm. Elena pushed through it all, not with panic, but with a steady, focused urgency, the way she had moved hundreds of times when lives depended on her hands. The Apache sat at the far end of the pad, its rotors still ticking slowly as they lost momentum. The helicopter looked like a wounded animal, scorch marks along the fuselage, a cracked canopy, hydraulic fluid dripping like dark blood onto the concrete. It hadn't crashed entirely. The pilot had somehow managed to hard land it before losing consciousness. Elena reached the cockpit and climbed the skid in one fluid motion. Inside, the scene froze her heart. The co-pilot gunner, Lieutenant Harper, was slumped forward, motionless, his helmet visor fractured and dark. There was no pulse, no breath. She closed his eyes with her fingertips, a habit that had become muscle memory. But the pilot, Captain Michael Rourke, that was different. He was still breathing, but shallow. His flight suit was soaked in blood from shrapnel lodged in his shoulder and side, his head tilted back weakly, eyes half open and unfocused. Elena didn't whisper comfort this time. There wasn't time for that. She unlatched his harness, braced herself, and pulled. Every inch required strength she didn't remember having. She dragged him down the skid and onto a stretcher being rushed over by 2 infantrymen. "Get him to medical now!" she ordered, voice sharp, unwavering. A mortar round whistled overhead, then impact somewhere behind them. The shockwave lifted grit from the ground. The infantrymen hesitated, ducking instinctively. "Go!" she shouted louder this time. They didn't hesitate again. She turned back to the Apache. The cockpit was open, systems powered, ammunition full, radios live. The bird had survived the landing. It was flyable. A voice barked in her ear, someone from the command post yelling orders through the base loudspeakers. The enemy convoy was pushing closer down the valley, armored trucks, technicals, mortar teams. If they broke through the base, everyone in it would fall. There were no pilots left, just her, a medic with flight training. But training wasn't qualification, and qualification wasn't authorization. Her hand gripped the cockpit frame. The radio crackled again, distressed, desperate. "We need air support. We need that Apache in the air now." She didn't ask permission. She climbed into the pilot's seat. And in that single motion, the woman who swore she was only here to save lives chose to risk everything to defend them. The cockpit felt heavier than she remembered. Every switch, every display, every warning indicator seemed louder, as if the machine itself were questioning her right to be there. Elena adjusted the pilot AS harness and lowered the cracked visor of the helmet she'd taken from the co-pilot S side. Her hands trembled for a second, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She had trained in simulators. She had practiced emergency takeoff procedures. She knew how to operate the controls, but this was different. This was combat. Alone. Outside, the base sirens wailed. Dust clouds rose from the valley floor where the enemy convoy pushed closer, engines roaring like a distant storm. The radio channels were chaos. Clipped voices, overlapping orders, men calling for ammunition, someone praying under their breath without realizing the mic was open. Elena inhaled slowly, pressing the throttle forward just enough to spool the rotors. The massive blades began to turn again, each rotation sending vibrations through the frame. A crew chief sprinted toward the Apache, one arm raised, confusion written across his face. "Elena, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted over the rising engine noise. Her voice came out steady, almost calm. "There's nobody else." "That's not your job." She met his eyes, and her expression silenced him. Not anger, not bravado, just certainty, the kind that comes from a place deeper than fear. The crew chief swallowed hard and stepped back, giving a final nod. He slapped the side of the aircraft twice. The old signal. "You're clear." The ground lurched as she lifted the collective. The Apache rose shakily at first, like a wounded bird finding its wings. But once airborne, something familiar returned. The feel of the machine, the balance points, the subtle pressure needed to turn. It was as if part of her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The radio operator's voice finally cut through the noise. "Apache 1, do you read?" She hesitated for only a moment, then spoke. "This is Ward. Captain Rourke is down. I'm taking control." Static, then disbelief. "Ward? You're a medic." "Not today," she replied. She swung the Apache toward the valley. The horizon tilted, mountains sharpened in her visor. Below, a convoy of armored trucks, heavy guns mounted on their beds, advanced toward the base like a tide of steel. Elena's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She rolled into a descent, lining up on the lead vehicle. The moment she pressed the trigger would change everything. Her oath, her identity, the story others would tell about her for the rest of her life. But she didn't fire. Not yet. She waited, calculating, breathing, choosing her moment. And then the valley opened beneath her like a scar carved into the earth. The enemy convoy moved with purpose. No hesitation, no disorder. These weren't raiders or amateurs. They were coordinated, disciplined, and confident. They believed they were closing in on a base already broken. They believed the sky was theirs, because the last Apache crew had gone down, and they thought no one would replace them. Elena leveled her altitude just above the ridgeline. The engine's low growl vibrated through her spine. She kept her breathing slow, her voice muted inside the helmet. She had listened to pilots speak before missions, short, sharp phrases, as if reducing emotion could reduce danger. But she wasn't a pilot here to execute doctrine. She was a medic, here to protect what was left. She scanned the convoy through the helmet's targeting display. 12 vehicles, light armor plating, heavy machine guns, mounted mortars, and one command truck in the rear, radio antenna and shielded windows. Take that out, and their coordination would break. Leave it, and this valley would become a graveyard. The temptation was to go in fast, strike, pull out, survive. But survival wasn't the mission. Stopping them was. Elena guided the Apache lower, using the mountain's shadow to mask her approach. The rotors whispered instead of roared, the terrain muffling her sound. She could almost hear her instructor's voice from training years ago. The best attack isn't loud, it's invisible. You kill them before they know you were there. Her thumb hovered over the master arm switch. Inside the base, soldiers took positions along sandbag walls. Some watched her silhouette skim the ridge. Others only heard radio whispers. The medic is in the air. No one believed it. Some refused to. Some prayed it was true. The first shot she took was not with rockets, not with Hellfire missiles, not with anything destructive at all. She turned on the Apache's loudspeaker. Her voice echoed down the valley, carried by the helicopter's external audio system. Turn back. Now. Leave this valley and live. For a second, one impossible second, the convoy slowed. The lead gunner actually looked up, and that was when they realized what was hunting them. The command truck in the rear accelerated. A mortar tube in the center vehicle angled upward. A machine gunner swung his weapon and opened fire toward the sky, tracer rounds streaking past Elena's canopy like burning comets. Her thumb switched from mercy to war. Master arm, on. Her heart hit once, heavy, deep. She pressed the trigger. The first missile left the rail. A flash, a trail of smoke, a streak of fire descending toward the valley floor, and everything beneath her exploded into chaos. The missile struck the lead vehicle dead on. A bloom of fire rolled up into the cold mountain air, a shockwave of dust shattering the convoy's formation. The truck behind it swerved, tires skidding through loose gravel. Soldiers dove out, scrambling for cover, their shouts swallowed by the roar of the explosion. The sound echoed through the valley like a thunderclap, not just heard, but felt. Elena didn't watch the fireball. She watched the movement, the reaction, the pattern of how they adapted. Her eyes weren't on the destruction. They were on the survivors. A medic sees where life clings on. Even now, she calculated where the threats were strongest. What would move first? Who would kill next? The radio crackled in her ear, voices stunned more than panicked. Apache 1! Is that Ward? Holy, she's actually... Focus! Focus! Provide grid fire! Cover her run! No one was prepared for this. Not her own side, and definitely not the enemy. The convoy commander regained control quickly. The mortar team dropped to one knee, leveling a tube and adjusting for elevation. The command truck accelerated, trying to gain distance and signal reinforcements. A technical mounted with a .50 caliber pivoted upward, lining up a clear angle to fire. Elena swept wide, banking left. The G-forces pulled on her ribs, every muscle in her core tense with the effort. She felt the Apache become part of her. No longer a machine. Something alive. Something that responded not to instructions, but to intent. The .50 caliber opened fire. Tracers hammered up toward her, streaks of burning orange. The canopy rattled as rounds struck armor plating. She held her course, straight into the danger, because turning away now would give them time to reform. Her finger squeezed. The 30mm chain gun whirred to life beneath the cockpit. The sound was less like gunfire and more like a deep mechanical growl. a sound you feel in your bones. A stream of shells tore across the road, ripping through the technical, shredding metal and sending the gunner spinning backward. The mortar team panicked. Their rounds slipped from their hands, clattering to the ground. They scattered. Elena didn't pursue them. She went for the command truck, the brain of the operation. But as she angled toward it, the ground forces scattered into the rocks, and something else appeared. Faint at first, then unmistakable. A second convoy. Further down the ridge. Reinforcements. This wasn't a raid. This was an overrun operation. A full-scale push meant to erase the base entirely. She had minutes, maybe less, and she was alone in the sky. Her fuel, her ammo, her strength, all finite, all draining. But below her, in that base, were the people she had patched, held, prayed over, kept alive. People she refused to lose. She throttled forward again. There would be no retreat, not while she was still breathing. The second convoy was still distant, crawling along the upper ridge road like a dark vein stretching across the mountainside. But its presence changed everything. This wasn't a single strike force. It was a coordinated assault. They meant to crush the base under numbers, weight, and relentless pressure. And if they reached the valley floor, the base's walls and sandbags wouldn't mean anything. Elena steadied her breathing. The headset hummed with ambient static, the kind that usually meant someone had run out of words. "Apache 1, we're tracking 2 hostile elements," the operations officer finally said. His voice was tight, strained, trying not to sound afraid. We've got no more air assets inbound. You're all we've got." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence was the answer. She angled lower, lining up another pass. Wind tore past the cockpit. The rotors clawed at thin mountain air. Her eyes narrowed as dust swirled below. The convoy reforming, weapons repositioning, men shouting orders in clipped bursts that carried even through the roar of the engine. This time, the response came fast. A shoulder-fired missile streaked upward, a burning lance aimed straight at her. Elena's reaction was instinctive. She threw the Apache into a hard bank, alarms screaming in her helmet. The missile sliced past the tail rotor, close enough to jolt the aircraft with turbulence. The plane shook, metal groaning in stress. Her breath caught, but her hands never left the controls. She leveled out, altitude dropping dangerously low, so low the skids nearly scraped the rocky slope. If she had been 2 seconds slower, she would have been a fireball. The base listened in silence, breathless, and Elena felt something shift inside her. Not fear, resolve. The kind that comes when you realize there is no next wave of help, no backup, no safety line. She brought the Apache around again. She locked onto the missile operator, a lone figure bracing another tube on his shoulder, and squeezed the trigger. The chain gun barked, and the figure flew backward, dust erupting beneath him. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The second convoy would crest the ridge any moment. She needed to break their momentum. Now, she selected rockets. The HUD flickered. Target reticle found the command truck again, the nerve center of the push. If she took that out, the coordinated assault would fall apart. Timing would collapse. Orders would scatter. Fear would take hold. She exhaled once, soft, controlled, and pressed fire. The rockets screamed off the rails, smoke billowing in long white tails behind them. They arced over the valley, toward the command truck. When suddenly the radio erupted, "Ward! Break! Anti-air gun on your 6!" She had been so locked on her target, she hadn't seen the new threat. A 23mm anti-air cannon dug into the ridge, swinging toward her. Close range, lethal. And she had less than a second to act. The anti-air cannon opened fire before she even saw it. A burst of red tracers streaked past the canopy, tearing the air into ribbons of light. The sound was a ripping thunder, deeper, heavier than small arms fire, a sound that meant death if you were slow by even the width of a heartbeat. Elena yanked the cyclic hard right. The Apache lurched, skidding through the sky in a sharp, evasive roll. The tracers arced behind her, skimming the tail boom, punching holes through metal that sparked sunlight as they passed. Warnings lit across her display. Hydraulic pressure fluctuating, rotor vibration rising, fuselage stress alarms throbbing like a pulse. The aircraft screamed in her hands, but it kept flying. She leveled out just above the ridgeline, breath sharp in her lungs. Instinct screamed to pull back, gain altitude, get distance. But altitude was exactly what the anti-air cannon wanted. High target, clear angle, clean shot. So she did what no trained pilot would have done. She dropped lower. So low the rotors nearly clipped the rock face. Wind kicked dust in spirals behind her. The mountains swallowed her into their shadow. For a moment, she disappeared from the enemy's line of sight entirely. The radio crackled again. "Apache 1, we're losing eyes on you. Do you copy? Ward? Ward?" She ignored the call. She needed to think. And she needed to think fast. The anti-air emplacement was dug into the ridge. Its firing arc was limited. Heavy weapon, heavy recoil. It couldn't swivel fast. Which meant, if she came at it from below, from the blind side, she would get one chance. One pass. She tightened her grip. Her pulse slowed. Time stretched. She remembered something Rourke used to say during training flights. "The helicopter is just metal. The fight is the heartbeat. As long as yours is steady, you're still in it." Her heartbeat steadied. She angled the Apache upward, rising just enough to clear the outcrop. The ridge snapped into view again, the anti-air gun crew scrambling, trying to reacquire her. They saw her at the last possible moment. The gun barrel swung, too slow. Elena squeezed the trigger. The 30mm chain gun spat fire. The cannon emplacement burst into shattered steel and smoke, fragments tumbling down the mountainside. But the victory was instant and terrible, because now she was exposed. And the second convoy, the one crawling along the ridge, had reached firing position. Dozens of rifles, heavy guns, rockets, all aimed upward, all aimed at her. A sky alone is wide, but sometimes it is also a noose. And she had just flown into its tightening loop. The ridge erupted in muzzle flashes. A storm of fire rose toward her, tracer rounds cutting jagged orange paths through the air. Elena pulled the cyclic left, then right, dancing the Apache through a corridor of death. The rotors screamed, metal clanged, warning panels lit up like a burning city at night. But she did not look at the damage. She looked only at the convoy. Because now, she understood something. They weren't advancing anymore. They were hesitating. The destruction of the anti-air gun had broken their certainty. Confidence had become caution. And caution, on a battlefield, is blood in the water. Elena drove the Apache forward, closing the distance between herself and the ridge. She went low, much lower than any pilot would ever willingly fly. The rotor blades carved turbulence inches above jagged rock as she weaved along the mountainside, using the terrain itself as armor. The convoy opened fire blindly into the fog of dust she kicked up. Some men shouted orders, others ducked, unsure where the predator was now. The very presence of the helicopter, still alive, still hunting, clawed at their nerves. Inside the base, soldiers watched from sandbag posts and shattered windows. They saw her silhouette flash between peaks, a dark shape swallowed and reborn by shadow. No one spoke, no one breathed, because everyone knew. She wasn't just holding the line. She was deciding who lived long enough to see another sunrise. The ridge finally leveled into a narrow plateau, the perfect kill box. Elena rose with it. The Apache surged upward, dust spilling off its frame like smoke peeling from fire. Suddenly, she was eye level with the second convoy. Dozens of enemy fighters froze. For a moment, a brief, impossible moment, time held. Her visor reflected their faces, startled, confident no more. Human, mortal. Then Elena spoke, not through the radio, not through the intercom, but under her breath. "For Rourke." Her thumb toggled to rockets, the firing sequence locked. She unleashed the entire salvo. Rockets tore across the ridge, each one trailing a ribbon of flame. The mountain shook with the impact, vehicles lifting from the ground, men diving for cover, shockwaves rolling through the thin air like thunder ricocheting from peak to peak. The plateau became fire. Bodies scrambled. Formation shattered. The convoy broke, not in planned retreat but in panic. They were no longer an attacking force. They were survivors trying to escape death. And yet, in the chaos, Elena missed something. A single vehicle breaking off, not fleeing, positioning. A technical with a mounted rocket pod scavenged from an old war. It locked onto her and fired. The rocket tore a sharp white path through the sky, straight toward her. The rocket closed the distance fast, too fast for thought, too fast for calculation. Elena reacted on instinct. She rolled the Apache hard, banking so sharply that gravity punched the air from her lungs. The rocket streaked past the cockpit, a white flare of smoke and fire, then detonated against the far rock wall in a spray of shattered stone. The shockwave slapped the helicopter sideways. Warning alarms flared, the aircraft groaning under sudden strain. The tail rotor stuttered, just for a second, but enough to make the Apache yaw violently before Elena wrestled it back under control. Her pulse hammered. Sweat stung her eyes, but her hands stayed steady. Below, the technical's gunner scrambled to reload the makeshift rocket pod. The truck reversed sharply, tires skidding on broken shale, as if the driver sensed the retribution descending upon him. Elena didn't hesitate. She pivoted the Apache in a short, brutal arc and fired a burst of 30mm shells. The rounds tore through the truck's engine block, flipping the vehicle onto its side in a spray of dust and flame. The gunner disappeared beneath